Alright, so this is the hands-on video from the tutorial. Now realize that, again, this isn't going to be a high production quality video. This is basically me just going through the steps that we would have gone through in the hands-on on Saturday. So bear with me. I might make a mistake. I might have to go back. But such is the nature of things. Um, Again, when we open up this start point basic dashboard Tableau file, we have a number of sheets that have already been pre-created. The first is profit by state. Then I have one called top 5, one called bottom 5. They're the same right now. We're going to filter those for the top 5 clients by profit, bottom 5 clients by profit. Then I've got this other one which is set up to become the top and bottom by profit view. And then we've got this sales trend and the order scatter, right? So these are all pre-created. They're not necessarily complete. When we're going to create a new dashboard, we go down here to the Add Dashboard button down here, or up here on Dashboard, you can just choose on the Dashboard menu, New Dashboard. You see that, as noted in the tutorial, we have a little bit different view here on the dashboard. Down at the bottom, on the left, we've got the sizing. And just for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to maybe make it like iPad landscape. All right. And then we just start dragging our sheets onto the dashboard. And as you're dragging, you can see that this gray shading tells you whether it's going to be on a column or a row, etc. And for some reason, Tableau likes it better if you set up while you're dragging these things, if you set up the columns first. You can make it work either way, but it just seems to work better when you start with getting your column set up first. And you see by default, it creates these areas, and you can see that we don't have a whole lot of space here for all of this stuff, but we'll work on that throughout the tutorial. So the first thing we're going to do is fix this top 5 and bottom 5. And remember that I said in the tutorial that I used to do it this way, and so I'm going to show you why this way might not be the best way, and then we'll switch to this top and bottom. So remember that we need to first ensure that we're going to have just the top 5 and the bottom 5, and there's a couple ways to do that. One way you can always filter by any category is to drop the category into the filters, and if you want to go to the top button, the top tab, you can see that you can actually choose the top or the bottom some number by a field and a calculation. Or you can actually write your own formula. In this case, if we chose top 5 and hit apply, hit OK, I have a problem. What did I do? Oh, I chose customer segment. Sorry, I meant to choose customer name. All right, top 5, OK. And now nothing shows up. Now, why does nothing show up? Why does nothing show up? Well, the reason nothing shows up is because the top 5 customer names are not in the United States. But that filter is, for some reason, not applying to everything. It's not applying to pick the top 5 based upon the country and state. It's just saying, well, we can filter by country and state, but we haven't yet. And when we filter for top 5, we have filtered by country and state based upon the profit by state tab. But this top 5 is somehow separate from it. And here's how we fix that. Every query on all of these different tabs is independent from the other tabs, unless we set up what's called a context filter. And a context filter basically will apply the filter as you might want to call it the overarching filter for everything in the workbook. So if something's added to the context as a filter, everything in that workbook is going to be set up according to that context. So all I'm going to do here is take this country filter on the profit by state sheet and add it to the context, and the state and add it to the context. And now when I switch over here to top 5, you can see that the filters have turned gray here because they're in the context. And now the top 5 customers for the country that's been filtered and the state that's been filtered are showing up. Okay, so you see here that that's now gray here, it's gray here, and it's gray on all the other tabs. Okay? So now if I actually went to bottom 5 and did the same thing, I wouldn't have to do anything else because that context filter is already applied. Okay. So we see now that we've got this one, we've got top 5, we've got bottom 5. There's some things we can immediately do to make these things better. One is we could sort them. And we see now on the dashboard that I've got those things. Now there's not a lot of space here, right? And so I'm only seeing 3 and I've got a scroll bar. What are some of the things I could do? Well, I could go here and choose to fit the entire view, which will get everything on there. And I could do the same thing on this one. Now you'll notice because there's so little space, maybe we are using up too much space here for titles and stuff. So maybe I could just change this title. Instead of being called top 5, I could call this top 5 and bottom 5 by profit. Get rid of sheet name. Hit apply. And then I could, oops, didn't get rid of everything. Hit apply, okay. Then I could make this, I could actually take that title out, right? Right, and so now I've got customer name and customer name here, but the sizing's kind of funny. I can't control the way that the sizing is between 2 different views and do it very easily, if at all, in Tableau. So we get into trouble when we're going to try to want to show these 2 different views, but have them kind of have like the same size axes, etc. But there are some things we can try. All right, so let's first go to top 5 and sort it the other way, so it's like this. So one thing we could do, just so it's clear which are the top and which are the bottom in our view, is we could take profit and drop it onto color. We could do the same thing on this one, drop it onto color. And so now when we go to our dashboard, now that we've got top 5 and bottom 5, we can really, people are gonna know that it's top 5 is here, bottom 5 is here, but we're still a little bit messed up because we've got the bars going different ways. Let's see what happens if we try to make the bars at least go the same way. So we'll go to bottom 5, and I'm going to right click on the axis. I'm going to choose edit axis, and I'm just going to hit reversed and hit apply. And now you can see that on the dashboard they're both going to be having the same axis direction, even though one's negative and one's positive. Still, that's kind of confusing to people for a couple reasons. One, it's going the same direction, but it's really reversed. And 2, it's difficult to keep the x-axes consistent. So one thing we could do is we could go to both the top and the bottom and say, instead of letting the Tableau figure out the axes, we're going to make both axes 20,000. This, so the top 5 will be 20,000, the bottom 5 will be negative 20,000, but remember it's reversed, so it ends up being the same direction. And at least now the scales are consistent, but we still have narrower bars here, wider bars here. We could deal with this by potentially making this box a little bit bigger, giving it a little bit more space, but that'll, and that might be perfectly reasonable, but it'll be difficult to get it exactly the same. And so that might work, but we'll come back to that. So now we've got the dashboard basically set up with the visualizations that we wanted on the dashboard. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger because it's just kind of small. Let's make it, let's try there. All right, gives us a little bit more space. All right, so remember that we talked about the idea of filtering. All of these sheets have filters already built into them. But what we want to do is be able to set it up so that when I filter one, it might filter some of the others. Notice here, everything's kind of clickable now, but nothing's really happening. Okay, So the first thing we're going to do is set up some quick filters. To set up a quick filter, it's easy. We go to any of the sheets. We go to the quick filter. We can pick that we want to potentially, let's say, quick filter on state. So I'm going to choose state. You'll see that all the states come up here. Now, I'm glad it did this because notice it's showing a whole bunch of states that aren't in the United States, even though we've filtered the results for the United States. One of the things that you have to be aware of is that depending upon the way that you filtered, depending upon different things, sometimes you're going to get this kind of a list. Now it's easy to make sure that you only show the relevant values. One other thing you can do here is there's this little button here that says show fewer values, which in this case takes care of that and shows only the ones that are relevant to the context that we're in. You also have that option under here that you can actually say only the relevant values or the values in the context or all the values in the database. So you have control over which data is going to be showing up in your filters. You also have all kinds of control over what kind of a display you're going to show for that. And now you can see that when I change this, and I change maybe just to Alabama, you'll see that it's hitting all of the views. Now it's hitting all of the views. Is it hitting all the views? It's not hitting all the views, I don't think. Let's see. It is hitting all the views. Let me tell you how I did that. So if it wasn't hitting all the views, again, like I said, this is a unrehearsed video here. You could have chosen here to apply to all the worksheets, all using this data source. Now it did that automatically because back in Profit by State, I think I was experimenting with some things, and I think I chose to apply to worksheets all using this data source back here. So it really kind of does the same thing, but I had already applied it back here in Profit by State. If you're filtering and it's only changing one view, the one that the filter came from, make sure that you just choose to apply it to the worksheets that you want to. So if I was back the way I had started it and I was doing this filter, nothing else would have been changing. Just the one would have. But once I changed this to apply to worksheets all using this data source, now it's applying to all of them. So the quick filter is now working here on the right, but then we also wanted to make our filters work when we were clicking things in the dashboard. Remember, all you have to do to make this or any of the panes a filter to use on the dashboard is you click the drop down, you choose Use as Filter, and now when I click Texas, or I click on California, or I click on Oregon, or Washington, the filters are working. Now, this is when we get into trouble. For some reason that I have yet to be able to identify, when I use the quick filters over here, my top and bottom 5 profit filters work fine. But when I use the action, they don't. It doesn't refilter. And I'm not quite sure why. However, there's a lot of information out there on the web about people asking these exact same problems and having the same exact problem. And basically people have decided it's better not to use the top and bottom automatic category filter, and it's better to actually use a field like we did in the tutorial. So let's go back and set that up and remember how we do that. Now remember, we have the customer name filter here. We're going to get rid of it, and now they're all back here. But remember, we're going to just set up that ranking. We're going to use the index function to figure out what rank they are. So to do that, we're going to create a calculated field. We're going to call it top 5, or you could call it maybe in top 5, because it's going to be a Boolean. You can type if index is less than or equal to 5, then 1, else 0, end. So this is just typical if then else syntax. Very simple. If index, remember the index is the placement in the field in the view. So if it's in the top 5 and it starts at 1, so if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, then put a 1 in top 5 field, else put a 0. It's just a little Boolean we're going to be creating. Now we're going to do in the bottom 5 as long as we're doing this, right? So to do the bottom 5, we'll right click and choose create calculated field in bottom 5 if, now this is a little different, size minus index plus 1 is less than or equal to 5, then 1, else 0, end. We're basically doing the reverse because we're taking the size of the view, which is basically how many elements are in the view. We're subtracting out the index, the placement in that. We're adding 1 because if you do size minus index, it starts at 0 instead of 1. So we just added 1 so that it's the same basic logic. And we're hitting OK. And now we have 2 fields, in bottom 5, in top 5. So we're going to make these discrete. We're going to do them both now so we don't forget. We're going to drop in top 5 in here, and we're just going to just say, just choose the 1, apply, okay. And we're going to go to bottom 5, take out the customer name. We're going to drop in bottom 5, choose 1, apply, okay. And now our action filter works just as well as using the quick filter. So remember when we chose that uses filter, it created a dashboard action, which was this one here, where when something in profit by state is selected, target all the sheets with the filter. Now to make this dashboard a little bit more interactive, we could choose to add another quick filter such as order date. We might want to make this a little bit smaller. Do that a couple ways. One thing you can do is just give it less space and let it be scrollable. Or we could actually just choose to make it different, maybe multiple values with a drop down. And you can do something like this and make it much smaller, right? Which might be better to preserve space. Another thing you can do, if you look at the actual dashboard tutorial from Tableau that is posted now on Linkstreet, you can float these things. So you could actually choose this to make this floating. You can drag it on top of the area you want it to be showing on so that you can preserve all of this space. So maybe we'll just do that for fun. We'll drag these things over here, put them in areas that are unobtrusive in the different areas here, which helps us to, oops, no, gotta make it floating first. Which helps us to both preserve space and kind of associate different, just hide that one. Associate these different filters. Oops, dang it, make it floating first, John. Associate these things with the actual graph that they're part of. Okay? And you see that once things resize, you might actually have to move things around some more. Okay? So floating's nice, but it's also can get you into trouble, especially if you put it on top of data and then the data moves. So you want to use this sparingly. Okay? So the last thing I want to do now with this um, with this dashboard is actually to, so what are the problems? The main problem that we noticed when we were doing this in the hands-on is, note here, when you pick a different state, it's not possible to easily set up the width of the labels so that it's always the same. And again, carrying that between multiple um, graphs is going to be difficult. So anyway, we're going to, instead of that, we're going to, and actually there's multiple reasons that this is actually not the best thing. And the key thing is that we have a perception problem, that we have positive and negative going the same direction. Positive and negative, when you're dealing with columns and bars, the best practice is that when you're showing negative numbers that you use columns rather than bars. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is that it doesn't entail you having to put an axis in the middle of the visualization, which is always kind of weird. And then the others is that it just kind of fits. It fits better, and it's also more what people think of it, that 0 is the base, and things that go below 0 are negative and above are positive. It just looks better when we're dealing with negative numbers. So I'm going to take these two sheets out. Oops, sorry. And now I'm going to drop in top and bottom. We see that that's clearly illegible. We're not quite sure what it's doing. All we need to do is filter this result, and we do that by doing another calculated field, which top or bottom, we'll call it. Now we certainly could, if we want to, actually just actually we can't, because we can't do ors in the filters. So we have to do this in this calculated field. Now I think we could just do if in bottom 5 then equals 1, then 1, else if in top 5 equals 1, then 1, else 0, end. And we can just drop that in top or bottom into filters. Got to make it discrete first. In top or bottom into filters. Choose 1. Okay. And it worked. We also could have done in top or bottom by doing the actual calculation again that we did in the in top or the in bottom field. But it's probably better to, if you've put the logic one place, to reuse the logic elsewhere. Okay. The only other thing that we did during the, and we see that this does look kind of better than having the two sets of the two different graphs. Then the last thing that we showed was using a parameter, right? So instead of making it top 5, bottom 5, we wanted to use this top customers parameter. Oops, get that out of there. That's not what I meant to do. We wanted to look at this top customers. Remember, it's all a parameter is a like a global variable that you can apply to sheets, okay, or to calculations. In this case, top customers is set at 15. We can change it to anything between 5 and 40 with a step size of 5 in this. You can change any of that you want. Instead of using the in bottom 5 or top 5 hard-coded, what we can do is this. Going into oops, take that out. We can go and edit in bottom 5. And instead of actually having the 5 hard-coded, we just drop in top customers. And now it's going to show the 15, right? And you see that I've changed in bottom 5, and so now it's 15 on 1, and in top 5 is still 5 because I haven't changed it yet. I changed this to top customers, and now I've got 15 of each. And if I want to show that parameter so that people can actually have some other choices, I'll make this floating, put it right here. I'm going to choose 5. You see how that works. We're going to talk a lot more about how you can use parameters as we move forward. You're going to need to use them in the group project. Now, there's another YouTube video that's also on the playlist now, which is on how to do the spark lines and the bullet graphs. Right, so I'm not going to do that in this one. And that's it for now. I will talk to you next time.